Helena had always been a patient woman. Living in a beautiful house with a backyard pool, she enjoyed her peaceful evenings. But that peace was shattered when she noticed uninvited guests sneaking into her pool at night. At first she thought it was a one-time thing. Maybe some teenagers dared each other to jump in for fun. But when she found wet footprints leading away from the pool every morning, she realized it was happening regularly. She installed a security camera, and what she saw made her blood boil. A group of young men had made her pool their personal hangout spot. They snuck in late at night, swam, laughed, and left behind empty cans and snack wrappers. Helena wasn't the type to confront people aggressively, but she also wasn't going to let them disrespect her home. Instead of calling the police, she decided to handle things her own way. The next evening she prepared a little surprise. First, she added a special dye to the water, completely invisible but designed to react when mixed with human sweat. It would turn a deep shade of blue, marking anyone who took a dip. Then she set up an automatic sprinkler system around the pool that would go off at random intervals, drenching anyone nearby. Finally, she placed a motion-activated alarm near the gate. Just as expected, they came back that night. Helena watched from her window as the group climbed over the fence and eagerly jumped into the pool. Within seconds, loud shrieks filled the air as the water turned a shocking shade of blue, staining their skin and clothes. Panic set in, and as they scrambled out, the sprinklers blasted them with freezing water. They tried to run, but the motion alarm blared, lighting up the entire yard. Helena stepped onto her porch, arms crossed, smiling as they tripped over themselves in their haste to escape. "Hope you enjoyed your last swim," she called after them. The next morning she checked her cameras and saw no signs of them returning. The blue dye would take days to fade, and she imagined they had a lot of explaining to do. From that night on, her pool remained undisturbed, and Helena enjoyed her peace once more. Days passed, and Helena kept an eye on her security footage, half expecting the trespassers to return for revenge. But nothing happened. It seemed her little trick had worked better than she thought. One afternoon, while she was tending to her garden, she heard hushed whispers near her fence. Pretending not to notice, she continued pruning her roses, but her ears were sharp. "Dude, I swear it won't come off. My boss asked if I got into a fight with a smurf," one of the voices groaned. "I had to tell my mom it was some stupid prank gone wrong. She grounded me and I'm freaking 23, another complained. Helena smirked, satisfied. But just to be sure they never dared again, she walked up to the fence and called out sweetly, "Gentlemen, if you're looking for another dip, I can make sure this time the color stays for a month." There was a yelp, a rustle of bushes, and then hurried footsteps running away. She chuckled to herself, shaking her head. That would be the last of them. For a while life returned to normal. She enjoyed her peaceful swims under the stars, no longer worried about uninvited guests. But just when she thought the whole incident was behind her, something unexpected happened. One evening she found a small envelope tucked under her front door. Curious, she opened it and pulled out a handwritten note. Asterisk, "Dear pool lady, we're really sorry for sneaking into your yard. It was stupid and we shouldn't have done it. We learned our lesson, big time. Hope you can forgive us. Also, that blue stuff? Evil genius level. Respect. The former, midnight swimmers." Asterisk. Helena couldn't help but laugh. Maybe they weren't so bad after all. Still, she decided to keep the dye ready, just in case. Helena folded the note with a smile and tucked it into her kitchen drawer. It wasn't every day that troublemakers admitted their mistakes. While she appreciated the apology, she wasn't about to take down her security measures just yet. A week later, while she was out buying groceries, she bumped into a young man at the checkout counter. He had a faint blue tint still clinging to his nails, despite his efforts to scrub it off. Their eyes met and he froze, his face turning red. "You're the pool lady, aren't you?" he asked hesitantly. Helena raised an eyebrow. "And you must be one of my former uninvited guests." He let out an awkward chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, about that. I just wanted to say sorry in person. It was dumb and, well, I guess we all deserved what we got." Helena studied him for a moment before nodding. "Apology accepted. But tell me, what on earth made you all think sneaking into a stranger's pool was a good idea?" He sighed. "Honestly, it started as a joke. One of the guys used to live in this neighborhood and remembered how nice your pool was. He dared us to jump in one night and then it just became a thing. We never meant to cause trouble, but yeah, I see how messed up it was now." "Well," Helena said, crossing her arms, "I hope you've learned your lesson. Otherwise, I have an even stronger dye waiting." His eyes widened. "You're joking, right?" She simply smiled. As he walked away, still looking slightly nervous, Helena shook her head in amusement. Perhaps this whole situation had ended in the best way possible. Her pool was safe, the troublemakers had learned their lesson, and to her surprise she had gained a strange sort of respect from a group of reckless young men. That evening, as she relaxed on her patio with a glass of iced tea, she couldn't help but chuckle to herself. Life had a funny way of throwing unexpected adventures her way, but at least she always had a trick or two up her sleeve. Days passed, and Helena felt a sense of peace settle over her once again. The apology from the young man at the grocery store seemed genuine, and the fact that he'd come forward to own up to their mistake made her feel a little less wary about the world. Still, she wasn't about to let her guard down entirely. One evening, as she sat by her pool enjoying the warm breeze, she heard a soft knock on her back gate. Startled, she stood up and walked over, expecting perhaps a neighbor or someone who had noticed something odd. When she opened the gate, she was surprised to see the same young man from the grocery store standing there, a nervous smile on his face. "Hey, I hope I'm not bothering you," he began, his voice a little shaky. "But we were talking and we feel pretty bad about what happened. A few of us wanted to make it right." Helena raised an eyebrow. "Make it right? You already apologized." "Yeah, but, well, we thought maybe we could offer something in return. We were thinking of fixing up your garden or doing something nice. We kind of owe you that for the trouble we caused." She stared at him for a moment, trying to gauge if this was some sort of joke. But the sincerity in his eyes told her it wasn't. "Fix up my garden, huh?" she mused, looking over at her flower beds. They could definitely use some help after the months of neglect while she was dealing with their antics. "All right, I'm listening." "Well," he said, "we've all learned that a little respect goes a long way. I promise you no more sneaking into your pool or your yard. But we'll make sure you don't regret giving us a second chance." Helena smiled, a little impressed by their humility. "All right, I'll take you up on that. But I expect good work." Over the next few weekends, the group of young men showed up, sometimes one at a time, sometimes in a small crew, to help with her garden. They trimmed hedges, planted new flowers, and even built a small stone pathway that wound through the yard. Helena kept an eye on them, of course, but she could see they were genuinely trying to make up for their previous behavior. One Saturday afternoon, as she sipped lemonade and watched them work, one of them came over to her, wiping sweat from his brow. "I think we're almost done," he said, looking over the completed work. "How's it looking?" Helena looked around, impressed. The garden looked far better than it had in years, and the stone path was a beautiful addition. She stood up and nodded. "It looks great. Honestly, you've done more than I expected." The young man grinned, then paused, glancing at the others working nearby. "Well, we meant what we said. We're sorry, and we just wanted to make sure you know we respect you, and your privacy." Helena, seeing how they'd truly taken her words to heart, smiled warmly. I think you've done more than enough. Just promise me you won't try to sneak in again." "Cross our hearts," he said with a wink. From then on, Helena never had to worry about intruders in her pool again. And as for the young men, they kept their word. Over time they became friends of sorts, occasionally popping by to chat or offer help with odd jobs. Helena learned that sometimes, a little bit of patience and a clever solution could lead to unexpected rewards. The pool, once a symbol of their mischief, had become a place of peace once more. And Helena? She had gained not just a beautiful garden, but a sense of satisfaction that only comes from seeing people grow and change. Months passed and Helena's life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The young men had indeed kept their promise, and though they no longer helped her with her garden, they would sometimes stop by for a chat, or drop off a small gift, usually something handmade like a potted plant or a jar of homemade jam. Helena appreciated the thought even if she still kept her distance. One evening, just as the sun was setting, she sat by the pool, watching the water shimmer in the fading light. She had been reflecting on how far things had come, from the initial frustration of dealing with the trespassers, to the unexpected friendship that had developed. It had been an unusual experience, but one that had left her feeling strangely fulfilled. As she sipped her tea, she heard the familiar creak of her back gate opening. She turned, expecting to see one of the group, but this time it wasn't one of the young men. Instead, standing in the doorway was an older woman, probably in her late 50s, with a kind face framed by silver hair. She was holding a basket of fresh fruit, and there was a warm smile on her lips. Helena blinked, slightly confused. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. The woman chuckled softly. "I hope so. My name is Margaret, and I'm the mother of one of those boys you helped straighten out." Helena raised an eyebrow, suddenly realizing who she was talking to. "Ah, you must be his mother," she said, recalling the young man who had apologized to her in person. Margaret nodded, stepping closer. I've been hearing a lot about you. My son and his friends are so grateful for what you did. They speak so highly of you, and I just wanted to come by and thank you personally. I also wanted to give you something. This fruit is from our garden. I thought you might like some fresh produce. Helena smiled, touched by the gesture. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Margaret sat down beside her, and they spent the next hour chatting about the neighborhood, gardening tips, and stories about her son's mischievous past. Margaret explained that it had been a relief for her to see how the boys had matured after their run-in with Helena. They'd found a sense of responsibility, and the act of helping her had given them a new perspective on their actions. Helena listened carefully, realizing just how much her seemingly small act of standing her ground had affected not just the young men, but their families as well. It had set off a ripple of change, one that had gone far beyond the boundaries of her backyard. As the evening drew to a close, Margaret stood up, ready to leave. I hope we can visit again sometime. It's nice to meet someone who believes in second chances. Helena nodded, standing as well. I believe everyone deserves one. It's just about how they use it. Margaret smiled, turning to head back down the path toward her house. I'll be sure to let my son know you said that. He's still learning, but I think he's on the right track now. Helena watched her leave, feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction. The whole situation, from the initial frustration to the unexpected apologies, had taught her a lot. She'd stood firm, handled it in her own way, and in the end it had worked out for everyone, especially her. That night, as she locked up her gate and sat by the pool once more, Helena felt a deep sense of peace. Her home was her sanctuary, her garden thriving, her pool untouched by unwanted visitors. And perhaps most importantly, she'd witnessed the power of kindness and respect transforming not just her backyard, but the lives of a few young men, and their mothers too. For Helena, that was more than enough to make up for the trouble they had caused in the first place. As the seasons shifted, Helena's life grew quieter, yet richer with the connections she had made. The young men, now well into their 20s, had turned their energy toward more productive pursuits. They still dropped by occasionally to check in, bringing with them not only gifts but also updates on their lives. One had started a carpentry apprenticeship, another had gone back to school, and a third was working at a local charity. Helena, though a bit reserved by nature, had developed a genuine fondness for them. It was strange, really, how people who had once been a nuisance could become such a positive part of her life. Each visit, though brief, was a reminder of how transformative second chances could be. It made her reflect on the power of forgiveness, patience, and sometimes, a little clever ingenuity. One evening, just as autumn was beginning to paint the trees in shades of gold and crimson, Helena received another unexpected visitor at her gate. This time it was one of the boys, the one who had first approached her with the apology at the grocery store. His face was more mature now, with a hint of responsibility etched in the way he carried himself. "Evening, Helena," he greeted her with a smile that seemed to have been earned through hard work. "I've been meaning to stop by for a while." Helena, surprised to see him again, motioned for him to come inside. "You're always welcome. What's on your mind?" He hesitated for a moment, as though weighing his words. "I wanted to thank you again. Not just for helping us that night, but for giving us a chance to change. I've been thinking about it a lot lately." Helena raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you mean?" "Well," he said, shifting on his feet, "a while ago I made a mess of things. And you didn't just scold us or kick us out. You taught us a lesson without even realizing it. The thing is, I never really had anyone show me what respect and responsibility meant. Not like you did. And I think it's time I gave something back." Helena's interest piqued. "What do you have in mind?" With a shy smile, he pulled a small hand-carved wooden box from his bag. It was beautifully made, with intricate patterns etched into the wood, and it was polished to a gleaming shine. "I've been learning carpentry," he explained, "and I made this for you. It's not much, but it's from the heart. Just a way to show you that you really did change things for us." Helena took the box gently, her heart warming. "It's beautiful. Thank you." He shrugged, looking a little embarrassed. "I guess we all owe you more than just apologies. You gave us the chance to become better. I thought this was the least I could do to show my appreciation." As they stood there for a moment, Helena couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. She hadn't expected any of this. No gifts, no thank yous, but here they were, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures could lead to the biggest changes. "I'm proud of you," Helena said, her voice soft but sincere. "It takes a lot to recognize when you've made a mistake and to work hard to fix it. I'm glad I could help, even in my own way." He smiled again, this time with more confidence. "Well, you did. And I think we're all better for it." As he left, walking with the same sense of purpose he'd had when he first apologized to her, Helena couldn't help but feel a quiet joy. She had learned as much from them as they had from her. They had all changed, and in their own ways they had made her life richer, fuller. Sitting by her pool that evening with the wooden box resting on the table beside her, Helena felt a deep, profound peace. The garden flourished, the pool shimmered with the reflection of the setting sun, and the world outside her backyard felt just a little bit more hopeful. And for the first time in a long while, Helena realized that the real reward wasn't just the tranquility of her backyard or the satisfaction of having kept her peace. It was the understanding that sometimes, the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. As the weeks went by, Helena's sense of fulfillment grew deeper. The young man's gift, a beautiful wooden box, now sat on her mantel, a constant reminder of how far things had come. Every time she looked at it, she thought about the lessons they had all learned, and the unexpected friendships that had blossomed from what had started as an inconvenience. Winter rolled in, and the quiet peace that had settled over Helena's home seemed even more profound. The air was crisp, and her garden, now tucked under the first blanket of snow, looked serene. Despite the cold, she often found herself sitting on the porch, sipping hot tea and watching the world go by. Then, one chilly morning, a knock on her door stirred her from her thoughts. She opened it to find an older woman standing there, a familiar face. It was Margaret, the mother of one of the young men who had helped Helena all those months ago. This time she was holding a small basket, and her expression was both warm and excited. "Helena, I hope I'm not disturbing you," Margaret said with a bright smile. "I've been meaning to bring this over. It's something for you and your garden." Helena raised an eyebrow but stepped aside to let her in. "What's all this?" Margaret set the basket down carefully on the kitchen table. Inside, Helena could see several jars of homemade preserves, cherry, peach and strawberry, and a small envelope tucked under the lid of the basket. "I wanted to thank you once more," Margaret began. "You were such a good influence on my son and his friends. And I realized I never really properly expressed how much it meant to me. We've all come a long way thanks to you." Helena smiled, touched by the gesture. "You don't have to thank me. It was your sons who worked hard to make things right. I just gave them a nudge in the right direction." Margaret chuckled, clearly pleased. "Well, I think you underestimated the impact you had. The boys come by more often now and they talk about you with such admiration. And I'm seeing changes in my own son. He's more responsible, more thoughtful. I just wanted to share a little of what we've been doing this winter." Helena opened the envelope, unfolding the note inside. It was simple but heartfelt. "Dear Helena, we wanted to thank you properly for everything. My son and his friends have been a different group since they met you. I think you've made a big difference in their lives, and in mine too. I thought you might enjoy these as a small token of appreciation. With all my gratitude, Margaret." Helena felt a lump form in her throat as she finished reading. She had never expected to receive such heartfelt thanks, especially from someone she hadn't known before the whole incident. She wasn't the kind of person who sought recognition, but this gesture reminded her that sometimes, the impact of her actions reached farther than she ever imagined. "Thank you, Margaret," Helena said, her voice sincere. "This really means a lot to me." Margaret smiled warmly. "It's the least we could do. I know it's not much, but I hope you enjoy it. And if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." The two women talked for a while longer, sharing stories about their gardens, the changing seasons, and their families. As Margaret finally stood to leave, she paused at the door and turned back. "You know, Helena," she said thoughtfully, "you've given me a lot to think about. We spend so much time worrying about our kids, trying to protect them from mistakes. But sometimes it's the mistakes that lead to growth." Helena nodded, understanding exactly what Margaret meant. "I think we all learn best when we're allowed to stumble a little. It's how we get back up that matters." Margaret smiled again, and with one last wave she left, leaving Helena to reflect on the quiet depth of their conversation. It was true, sometimes the hardest moments in life were the ones that shaped us the most. And Helena had learned that even in the midst of frustration, there was always an opportunity for growth. For herself, for the young men who had once trespassed in her pool, and for the people she least expected to connect with. As winter deepened, Helena found herself more content than she could have imagined. The young men had long stopped needing her guidance, but they still kept in touch, offering help when needed and occasionally sharing a meal with her. The quiet relationships that had grown from her patience and understanding were perhaps the most valuable treasures she had. And as she sat on her porch one evening watching the snow gently fall, Helena felt a deep peace settle over her, knowing that her life had been touched by the unexpected, and that the lessons learned along the way would continue to echo for years to come.